The great hall of the Galactic Council was quiet. Too quiet. Elder Zixthala of the Vorthak race stood at the center of the massive chamber, his ancient form trembling slightly. Around him, representatives from over 10,000 different species waited in their floating pods and crystal chambers. Some breathed air, others lived in water, and a few existed as pure energy. But they all shared one thing. They had never seen a Vorthak this scared. The Vorthak were old, older than almost every other race in the galaxy. They had been traveling between stars for 50,000 years. They had seen empires rise and fall. They had watched entire species destroy themselves. They had faced wars that lasted centuries. Nothing frightened them anymore. Until now. Fellow beings of the Council, Elder Zixthala began, his voice carrying across the hall through translation devices. I come before you today with a warning. A warning about a species we discovered on the outer edge of our galaxy. The holographic display above the Elder's head flickered to life. It showed a small blue and green planet, spinning slowly in the darkness of space. The third planet from a yellow star. Nothing special about it. Nothing threatening. They call their world Earth, the Elder continued, and they call themselves humans. Some of the council members made sounds that might have been laughter. The Altarians, with their perfect crystal bodies, chimed like wind bells. The gas-dwelling Nephrites puffed clouds of amusement. A species that could barely leave its own planet? Why would anyone fear them? But Elder Zixthala was not finished. I know what you are thinking, he said, his old eyes scanning the chamber. Another primitive species. We have seen millions of them. They either join us peacefully or destroy themselves with their own weapons. This is the way things have always been. The Elder's form straightened and his voice grew stronger. But these humans are different. They do not follow the rules that govern all other life. Where other species choose the path of peace or the path of war, humans walk both paths at the same time. They create beautiful art and terrible weapons in the same day. They show great kindness to strangers and great cruelty to enemies. They are chaos. The display changed. Now it showed images from Earth. Cities with towering buildings and green parks. Humans helping each other during disasters. Humans fighting wars. Humans exploring the deepest oceans and highest mountains. Humans creating music and poetry. Humans building bombs that could destroy entire cities. Look at them, the Elder said. See how they live. They have had the power to destroy their own world for generations, yet they do not use it. Instead, they argue and fight and somehow still work together. They have hundreds of different groups on their planet, all believing different things, yet they trade with each other and share knowledge. Ambassador Kreltalk of the mighty Zorvan Empire spoke up. The Zorvans were warriors, respected throughout the galaxy for their honor in battle. Elder Zixthala, surely you do not fear a species that has not even mastered faster-than-light travel? Our weakest patrol ships could destroy their entire fleet. That is exactly what makes them dangerous, the Elder replied. You see weakness. I see adaptation. Do you know what they did when our scout ship observed them from their moon? The chamber fell silent. They noticed us, a species that should not even know that life exists beyond their world, somehow detected our presence. And do you know what they did next? They did not panic. They did not worship us as gods. They did not attack us. They tried to talk to us. The Elder's voice dropped to almost a whisper, and when we did not answer, they began to change. In the 3 months we watched them, they built new devices. They pointed listening equipment at the stars. They sent signals in hundreds of different patterns, trying to find a way to communicate. They learned. Prime Minister Veltar of the Altarian Trade Consortium spoke next. The Altarians were known for their logic and wisdom. They had been peaceful traders for thousands of years. Elder, with respect, this behavior seems normal. Most species try to contact others when they discover they are not alone. Most species try once or twice, then give up, the Elder corrected. Humans tried for months, and they got better at it each day. By the end of our observation, they were using mathematical concepts that our own scientists had taken decades to develop. They learned it in weeks. The display showed more images. Human children playing together. Human scientists working in laboratories. Human soldiers training for war. Human artists painting pictures of stars they had never seen. But it is not just their learning that worries me, the Elder continued. It is their nature. They do not accept that anything is impossible. When faced with a problem, they do not simply find the best solution. They find 10 different solutions, then combine them into something new. They do not follow the patterns that guide all other intelligent life. Counselor Thren of the peaceful Krelak Collective raised a concern. The Krelak had been pacifists for so long that they had forgotten how to fight. If they are so dangerous, why do you not simply eliminate them? Surely the Council could authorize such action to protect the galaxy. Elder Zixthala's expression grew sad. Because that would prove their point. One of their philosophers once said that the measure of intelligence is the ability to change. If we destroy them for being different, we become the very thing we fear. A force that cannot adapt, cannot grow, cannot change. And there is something else, the Elder added. In all our observations, despite their capacity for violence, despite their chaotic nature, they have one trait that appears in everything they do. Hope. They believe that tomorrow can be better than today. They believe that problems can be solved. They believe that even their enemies can become friends. The Elder's image shifted to show human space agencies, rockets reaching toward the stars, plans for ships that could travel between worlds, dreams of exploring the galaxy. They will not stay on their world forever, he warned. They are already planning to spread to other planets. And when they do, they will not conquer in the way we understand conquest. They will not follow our rules of expansion. They will change everything they touch, and everything they touch will change them. The Great Hall erupted in discussion. Some species wanted to quarantine the human system immediately. Others argued that the Council had no right to imprison a species for being different. The Zorvans wanted to test human strength in battle. The Altarians wanted to study them. The Krelak wanted to try peaceful contact. In the end, the Council voted. The decision was close but clear. They would watch the humans from a distance. If the humans proved to be a threat, they would act. If not, they would allow natural development to take its course. Elder Zixthala accepted the decision with the grace of his ancient species. But as he prepared to leave the chamber, he spoke one final warning. You have chosen to wait and see. That is your right. But remember this day when the humans come calling. Remember that you were warned. Remember that you chose not to listen. The Elder's image faded from the display. The Council members returned to their usual business of trade disputes and territorial negotiations. The warning about the humans was filed in the archives, marked as non-urgent observation required. In the far corner of the galaxy, on a small blue planet, humans continued to dream of touching the stars. They built their rockets and planned their missions. They wrote stories about meeting alien life. They wondered if they were alone in the universe. They had no idea that they had already been found. They had no idea that they had already been judged. And they had no idea that their mere existence had frightened one of the oldest and wisest races in the galaxy. Captain Veltar of the Centauri hegemony was having a normal day until the alarm started ringing. He had been patrolling the outer edge of Centauri space for 15 years. It was quiet work. Sometimes a merchant ship would get lost. Sometimes pirates would try to hide in the empty systems. Nothing exciting ever happened here. That changed when his sensor officer, Lieutenant Kex, announced contact with unknown vessels. Sir, we have 5 ships approaching from the direction of the Sol system, Kex reported. They appear to be primitive. Captain Veltar looked at the display screen. The ships were small, ugly things made of metal and ceramic. They moved slowly, much slower than any modern spacecraft. Their energy signatures were weak. Their weapons looked like simple projectile launchers. Everything about them screamed primitive species taking their first steps into space. Run identification protocols, the captain ordered. Check if they match any known designs. No matches in our database, sir, came the reply. But based on their technology level, I would estimate they are at least 1,000 years behind current galactic standards. This was exactly what Captain Veltar had expected. New species discovered space travel every few decades. Most were eager to join galactic civilization. Some were hostile but easily defeated. All followed predictable patterns. Open a communication channel, he ordered. Standard first contact protocol. The face that appeared on his screen was unlike anything in the Centauri database. The being had pale skin, strange hair growing only on the top of its head, and 2 small eyes. It looked fragile, almost like a Centauri child. Unknown vessels, Captain Veltar announced in his most official voice. You have entered Centauri space. State your purpose and prepare to be escorted to the nearest registration facility. The alien, the human, looked directly at him through the screen. When it spoke, its voice was calm and clear. This is Captain Elena Rodriguez of the Earthship Discovery. We're explorers from the planet Earth. We come in peace, but we won't be pushed around either. Captain Veltar blinked. That was not a standard response. Most new species either begged for mercy or immediately declared war. This human seemed to be doing neither. Captain Rodriguez, he said carefully, you are required to submit to escort and inspection. This is galactic law. With respect, Captain, Rodriguez replied. We're not part of your galactic government. We don't recognize laws we had no part in making. We're happy to talk, but we won't be forced to do anything. For a moment, Captain Veltar was speechless. In his 15 years of patrol duty, no species had ever politely refused a direct order. He checked his manual. There were procedures for hostile responses and cooperative responses. There was nothing about polite defiance. Captain Rodriguez, if you do not comply, we will be forced to take action, he warned. Then I guess we have a problem, Rodriguez said, because we're not going anywhere we don't want to go. And that was how the strangest standoff in Centauri history began. For 3 days, the 5 human ships sat motionless in space while Captain Veltar tried to figure out what to do with them. They did not attack. They did not retreat. They did not beg for mercy. They just waited. What made it worse was that the humans kept talking. Captain Rodriguez called every few hours to check on the Centauri crew, ask about their families, and discuss the weather on their home planets. She seemed genuinely interested in Centauri culture. She asked questions about their history, their art, their food. It was the most polite invasion Captain Veltar had ever experienced. But something else was happening. Something that made the captain very uncomfortable. The humans were learning. On the first day, their ships were slow and clumsy. By the second day, they were moving with more precision. On the third day, Lieutenant Kex reported something impossible. Sir, the human ships are showing increased energy output, he said, confusion clear in his voice. Their engines are now operating at 15% above their original capacity. That's impossible, Captain Veltar replied. Their technology is primitive. They can't just upgrade their engines in the middle of space. Sir, they appear to have done exactly that. The captain stared at the sensor readings. The humans had somehow improved their own technology while sitting still in space. They had watched the Centauri ships, studied their energy patterns, and figured out how to make their own ships better. No species learned that fast. No one. Captain Veltar called for reinforcements. Not because the humans were threatening him, but because he was starting to understand that these were not ordinary primitives. When the additional Centauri ships arrived, Captain Rodriguez contacted him again. More ships, Captain Veltar? She asked. Are you expecting trouble? Just following standard procedures, he replied. I see. Well, we're still not going anywhere. We don't choose to go. But I have an idea. Instead of sitting here staring at each other, why don't we try talking? You know, like civilized beings. Against all protocols, Captain Veltar found himself agreeing to a face-to-face meeting. They met on the human ship Discovery. Captain Veltar was surprised by how clean and organized it was, despite its primitive technology. The humans had created art on their walls, paintings of their home planet, pictures of their families, even some abstract designs that somehow reminded him of Centauri poetry. Captain Rodriguez greeted him personally at the airlock. She was smaller than he had expected, but she carried herself with confidence. When she smiled, it seemed genuine. Welcome aboard, Captain, she said. I hope you don't mind the accommodations. We're still new at this whole space travel thing. She led him to a small room where several other humans waited. They offered him food, simple but well prepared, and asked about his journey. They seemed fascinated by everything about him, from his blue skin to his forearms to the way his people had developed space travel. We've been dreaming about meeting other species for generations, Rodriguez explained. We have hundreds of stories about what aliens might be like. You're our first real contact with galactic civilization. And what do you think so far? Captain Veltar asked. Rodriguez considered the question carefully. Honestly, you seem a lot like us. You have families, you have jobs, you have rules you follow. You're just trying to do the right thing. Then why won't you follow our escort procedures? Because we've seen what happens when powerful groups make rules for weaker ones, she replied. It usually doesn't end well for the weaker ones. We're not looking for a fight, but we won't be bullied either. Captain Veltar spent 3 hours on the human ship. He met engineers who asked detailed questions about Centauri technology. He met scientists who wanted to know about other species in the galaxy. He met a cook who insisted on teaching him how to prepare something called coffee. Most surprisingly, He met the ship's negotiator, a human named David Chen, who presented a formal proposal. "We want to establish diplomatic relations with the Centauri hegemony," Chen explained. "We're willing to follow reasonable laws and procedures. We're happy to share our knowledge and learn from yours. But we want to do it as equals, not as prisoners or subjects." It was a reasonable request, more than reasonable. It was exactly the kind of proposal that the Centauri government usually accepted, from new species. But these humans had made their proposal after refusing direct orders and somehow upgrading their ships while under observation. They had turned a military standoff into a diplomatic negotiation without firing a single shot. Captain Veltar returned to his ship with more questions than answers. He filed his report that night, trying to explain the unexplainable. "The humans appear to be primitive but show remarkable adaptability," he wrote. "They learn at an unprecedented rate and seem capable of solving problems through methods not found in standard tactical manuals. They are not hostile, but they refuse to be controlled. Recommend elevated monitoring and careful diplomatic engagement." He paused, then added one more line. "These humans do not follow normal patterns of species development. Unknown if this represents opportunity or threat." The standoff ended the next day with a formal agreement. The humans would accept Centauri escort to the nearest diplomatic station. The Centauri would treat them as guests, not prisoners. Both sides would work toward establishing normal relations. As the small human fleet followed the Centauri ships toward the inner systems, Captain Veltar watched them on his sensors. The humans were still learning, still adapting, still making small improvements to their ships. He thought about the warning from the Vorthak Elder, filed somewhere in the Galactic archives. Something about humans being dangerous because they were different. For the first time, Captain Veltar began to understand what the Elder had meant. These humans were not dangerous because they were violent or aggressive. They were dangerous because they did not accept that things had to stay the same. They saw every challenge as a problem to solve, every obstacle as something to overcome, and they were very, very good at solving problems. 50 years had passed since the first human ships entered galactic space. What happened next surprised everyone. Most species expanded in predictable ways. The aggressive ones conquered systems through military force. The peaceful ones slowly colonized empty worlds. The traders bought their way into new territories. Everyone followed the same basic patterns that had worked for millions of years. Humans did all of these things at once. And somehow they made it work. Admiral Theclon of the Zorvan Empire stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching human cargo ships unload supplies at Zorvan Station 7. 6 months ago, these same humans had been fighting alongside his warriors against Cretan raiders. Now they were delivering medical supplies and offering to help repair the station's defenses. Admiral, his aide, Commander Grallek, approached with the daily reports. "The human merchant captain is requesting permission to bring her daughter aboard for a tour of the ship." Theclon almost smiled. Almost. Zorvan warriors did not smile, but these humans made it difficult to maintain proper dignity. "Which captain?" he asked. "Captain Sarah Kim of the merchant vessel Friendship. She says her daughter is studying galactic military history and would be honored to meet real Zorvan warriors." The admiral considered this. 6 months ago, he would have been insulted by such a casual request. The Zorvan military was not a tourist attraction. But these humans had fought beside his warriors when the raiders attacked. They had shared their supplies when his ships ran low on ammunition. They had even taught his medical staff new techniques for treating battle wounds. "Permission granted," he decided, "but remind the captain that this is a military vessel. Her daughter must follow proper protocols." An hour later, Admiral Theclon found himself giving a tour to a small human female who could not have been more than 20 standard years old. She asked intelligent questions about Zorvan tactics, listened carefully to his explanations of honor in battle, and somehow convinced 3 of his toughest warriors to show her how they maintained their weapons. "Sir," she said as the tour ended, "my mother wanted me to give you this." She handed him a small package. Inside was a bottle of something called Earth Whiskey, and a handwritten note from Captain Kim. "Admiral Theclon," the note read, "thank you for allowing humans to prove themselves in battle beside your warriors. Your people fight with honor, and it has been our privilege to learn from you. This whiskey is from my family's private stock. Please share it with your crew and remember that humans do not forget their friends." That evening, Admiral Theclon sat in his private quarters, sipping the strange Earth alcohol and trying to understand how humans had changed everything he thought he knew about warfare and friendship. On the other side of the galaxy, Ambassador Veltaran of the Altarian Trade Consortium was having his own problems with humans. The Altarians had controlled the major trade routes between the inner and outer systems for over 1,000 years. They knew exactly how much it cost to move goods from one place to another. They had precise calculations for profit margins and delivery schedules. Their trade system was perfect. Then the humans arrived, with their ridiculous ideas about thinking outside the box. A human trading company called Stellar Pathways had somehow found a way to make the longest route between two systems more profitable than the shortest route. They did this by stopping at stations that other traders ignored, picking up small cargoes that no one else wanted, and somehow combining multiple deliveries into single profitable trips. It should not have worked. According to every economic model the Altarians had developed, it was impossible, but human traders were making huge profits while providing better service than anyone else. Ambassador Veltaran had called a meeting with the human trade representative, a woman named Jennifer Walsh, to demand an explanation. "It's simple," Walsh explained, showing him a three-dimensional chart that made no sense. "Instead of thinking about individual trips, we think about networks. Every stop we make connects to every other stop. We're not just moving cargo. We're moving information, making contacts, building relationships." "But the math?" Veltaran protested. "The fuel costs alone should make these routes unprofitable." "Only if you're just thinking about fuel," Walsh replied. "But what if the cargo we pick up at stop 3 pays for the fuel to get to stop 7? What if the information we gather at stop 5 helps us find a better deal at stop 12? What if the friend we make at stop 2 becomes a customer for life?" Veltaran stared at the chart. It was chaos. It was completely irrational. It violated every principle of efficient trade, and it was working better than anything the Altarians had ever developed. Meanwhile, in the peaceful Krelak systems, Elder Zanrel was discovering that humans had an unexpected talent for friendship. The Krelak had been isolationists for so long that most species had forgotten they existed. They preferred to study philosophy and create art in the quiet of their crystal cities. They had no interest in galactic politics or trade disputes, but somehow humans had found them, and instead of demanding trade agreements or military alliances, they had asked about Krelak music. It started when a human exploration ship detected strange energy patterns coming from the Krelak homeworld. Instead of reporting it as a potential threat, the human captain had identified the patterns as music. Complex, beautiful music unlike anything in the galactic databases. The human ship had sent a response. Not words or mathematical formulas, but music. Simple human melodies played on instruments made of wood and metal. Elder Zanrel had been the one to authorize first contact. He was expecting the usual demands for resources or technology. Instead, the humans had simply wanted to share songs. 6 months later, there was a human music student living in every major Krelak city. They learned Krelak harmonics while teaching human rhythm. They wrote songs together that combined crystal tones with wooden instruments. They created art that neither species could have imagined alone. "They do not want anything from us," Elder Zanrel reported to the Council of Contemplation. "They simply want to create beauty together. It is unprecedented." But it was not just the humans' capacity for friendship that worried the galaxy's observers. It was their rate of growth. Dr. Kexithera of the Vorthak Science Institute had been tracking human expansion for 20 years. Her reports grew more alarming each year. "They are not following standard development patterns," she reported to Elder Zixthala. "Most species take centuries to master faster than light travel. Humans improve their technology by 300% in 50 years. Most species establish colonies slowly, one system at a time. Humans have established settlements in 47 systems simultaneously." "And their population growth?" the elder asked. "Unprecedented. But not through reproduction alone. They are attracting immigrants from other species. Altarians seeking better trade opportunities. Zorvans looking for honorable employment. Even some Krelak artists wanting to explore new forms of expression." Elder Zixthala studied the reports with growing concern. They are not conquering the galaxy. They are becoming it. The truth was even more disturbing than the elder realized. In 50 years, Humans had not only spread across dozens of systems, they had somehow made those systems better. Human medical research had led to cures for diseases that had plagued multiple species for generations. Human engineering techniques had improved space station efficiency by 40%. Human agricultural methods had increased food production on colony worlds throughout the Outer Rim, and they shared everything. Every discovery, every improvement, every innovation was freely given to anyone who asked for it. Ambassador Chenwei of the Human Diplomatic Corps tried to explain this to a confused gathering of galactic representatives. "We don't believe in keeping secrets," she said simply. "If we develop something that helps people, why wouldn't we share it? If our friends succeed, we succeed. If our neighbors are prosperous, we're more secure." It just makes sense. It did not make sense to most of the galaxy. Species guarded their technological advantages carefully. Knowledge was power, and power was not given away freely, but humans seemed incapable of thinking that way. They taught their medical techniques to anyone who wanted to learn. They published their research in open databases. They invited other species to participate in their experiments and explorations. The result was a level of cooperation and innovation that the galaxy had never seen before. In his private office, Elder Zixathala reviewed the latest reports from human space. 47 systems, millions of humans and aliens working together, technologies advancing at impossible rates, trade networks that defied economic logic but somehow produced prosperity for everyone involved. His worst fears were coming true. The humans were reshaping everything they touched, and everything they touched was becoming more like them, innovative, cooperative, optimistic, and completely unwilling to accept that problems could not be solved. The Elder opened a communication channel to the Galactic Council. It was time for another warning, but he suspected that once again no one would listen. After all, the humans were not conquering anyone. They were not threatening anyone. They were just making everything work better than it had before, and that, the Elder realized, was exactly what made them so dangerous. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was called at 0300 Standard Time. Council members from across the galaxy appeared as holograms, their images flickering with the urgency of faster-than-light communication. Some had been sleeping. Others had been in the middle of important meetings. All of them looked terrified. Supreme Admiral Cortex of the Galactic Defense Force stood at the center of the chamber, his usually perfect uniform wrinkled from a sleepless week. Behind him, the main display showed images that no one wanted to see. Ships, millions of them, moving through dark space at the edge of the galaxy like a swarm of insects. But these were not ships in any sense that the Council understood. They were organic, alive, constantly changing shape as they moved. They consumed everything in their path. Planets, asteroids, even the energy from stars themselves. Fellow Council members, Admiral Cortex began, his voice grim. "I present the greatest threat our galaxy has ever faced. We have designated them the Devourers." The images changed, showing planets that had been stripped bare, leaving only dead rock floating in space. Solar systems where the stars themselves had been drained of energy, becoming cold, dark spheres. "Our intelligence suggests they have consumed 17 galaxies before reaching ours," the Admiral continued. "They appear to be a hive mind focused solely on conversion of all matter and energy into more of themselves. They cannot be reasoned with. They cannot be stopped through conventional means." Elder Zixathala of the Vorthak spoke first. "How much time do we have?" "At their current rate of advancement, they will reach the Outer Rim colonies in 6 months. The inner systems will fall within 2 years. The chamber erupted in panicked discussion. Representatives demanded immediate evacuation of the outer systems. Others called for the construction of massive defense fleets. A few suggested attempting to communicate with the Devourers. Admiral Cortex raised his hand for silence. "We have already prepared a strategic response," he announced. "Operation Core Shield will relocate all essential populations and infrastructure to the inner systems. We will establish a defensive perimeter around the galactic core and prepare for a siege that may last thousands of years." It was a reasonable plan. It was the same strategy that had worked for millions of years when facing overwhelming threats. Retreat to defensible positions, conserve resources, wait for the enemy to make mistakes or lose interest. Prime Minister Veltar of the Altarian Trade Consortium spoke for many when he said, "It is our only logical option. We sacrifice the outer systems to save the core. Some losses are acceptable to preserve civilization. Elder Zanrel of the Krelak Collective agreed. The outer rim has always been expendable. We retreat, we endure, we survive. This is the way. But then a new voice cut through the discussion. A human voice? No. Admiral Elena Rodriguez, now commanding the human fleet, appeared as a hologram at the edge of the chamber. Her image was sharp and clear, broadcast from the outer rim where human ships were already moving toward the Devourer advance. Admiral Rodriguez, Admiral Korthek said carefully, surely you understand the strategic necessity of withdrawal. Your forces cannot hope to stand against this threat. We're not withdrawing, Rodriguez replied simply. We don't retreat. We've never been good at running away. The chamber fell silent. Every species represented had faced impossible odds before. Every species had learned when to retreat and regroup. It was basic survival strategy, but the humans were rejecting it completely. Admiral Rodriguez, Prime Minister Veltar said, trying to sound reasonable, your courage is admirable. But this is not about courage. This is about mathematics. The Devourers outnumber all our combined fleets by a factor of millions to one. Then we'd better get creative, Rodriguez replied. What happened next violated every rule of military strategy and diplomatic protocol that the galaxy had established over millions of years. Instead of requesting support or demanding resources, the humans began broadcasting on every frequency they could access. Every species in the galaxy received the same message, transmitted in hundreds of languages simultaneously. This is Admiral Rodriguez of the Human Defense Force, the broadcast began. We're moving to engage the Devourer advance. Any species willing to fight, we're sharing everything we know. No conditions, no payments, no political demands. Just the knowledge you need to help us protect everyone. The broadcasts included detailed tactical analyses, theoretical weapons designs, and strategic assessments that human scientists had somehow developed in the 6 days since the Devourer threat was announced. Technical specifications for new shield technologies, plans for modified weapons that might penetrate Devourer defenses, coordination protocols for multi-species fleet operations. Dr. Kexathera of the Vorthak Science Institute studied the human data with growing amazement. Elder, she reported to Zixthala, the humans have developed 17 different theoretical approaches to fighting the Devourers. In 6 days, some of these concepts would have taken our best scientists years to develop. And they are sharing all of it freely? The Elder asked. All of it. They're not asking for anything in return. Across the galaxy, other species were making the same discovery. The Zorvan Military Command received tactical plans that played to their warriors' strengths, while accounting for their weaknesses. The Altarian engineers found designs for weapons that could be manufactured using their existing industrial base. The Krelak scientists discovered theoretical frameworks that combined their understanding of energy harmonics with practical military applications. But what shocked everyone most was not the quality of the human plans. It was the fact that the humans were asking for help. We can't do this alone, Admiral Rodriguez broadcast to anyone who would listen. We need the Zorvan warrior tradition. We need Altarian manufacturing capacity. We need Krelak energy research. We need the wisdom of the Vorthak and the trading networks of every species in the galaxy. We're not trying to be heroes, she continued. We're trying to survive. And we think survival works better when everyone works together. The first species to respond was the Korthax Collective, a hive-minded race of scientists from the Middle Rim. They had received human research data and discovered that several human theories could be combined with their own work to create entirely new defensive technologies. Human Admiral Rodriguez, the collective broadcast. We offer our research capabilities and manufacturing resources. Send us coordinates for joint operations. Within hours, other responses began arriving. A Zorvan battle group changed course to rendezvous with human forces. Altarian engineering teams announced they were retooling their factories to build human-designed weapons. Even some Krelak artists volunteered to help, claiming that the energy patterns they studied in their music could be adapted to disrupt Devourer communications. In the Galactic Council chamber, Admiral Korthex watched the tactical displays with disbelief. They're forming a coalition, he reported to the Council. Species that have barely spoken to each other for centuries are coordinating joint operations. But it's impossible, Prime Minister Veltar protested. Multi-species military cooperation has never worked. The communication problems alone should prevent any meaningful coordination. The Admiral checked his displays again. Sir, they're using human-developed translation protocols and command structures. Somehow they're making it work. Elder Zixthala studied the reports from his science teams. The humans were not just fighting the Devourers. They were creating something the galaxy had never seen before, a truly unified defense force that combined the best capabilities of dozens of different species. Zorvan warriors provided tactical expertise and battlefield courage. Altarian engineers mass-produced weapons and equipment. Krelak scientists developed new energy-based defenses. Vorthak strategists planned long-term operations. And human coordinators somehow made all of it work together. They're doing exactly what I warned they would do, the Elder said quietly to his aide. They're reshaping everything they touch, but this time, he was beginning to wonder if that might not be a bad thing. The first battle between the Allied forces and the Devourers took place at the edge of the Kepler system. It should have been a massacre. The Devourers outnumbered the Allies by nearly 1,000,000 to 1. Instead, it became the first Devourer defeat in recorded history. The Allied fleet used tactics that no single species could have developed alone. Zorvan warriors in modified ships carried Altarian-built weapons that fired Krelak energy constructs, guided by Vorthak's strategic calculations and coordinated through human command protocols. When the Devourers adapted to one type of attack, the Allies switched to completely different approaches developed by different species. When the enemy tried to overwhelm specific positions, they found themselves facing coordinated responses from civilizations that had never worked together before. The battle lasted 18 hours. When it ended, the Devourer advance had been stopped for the first time in their recorded existence. But more importantly, something new had been born. Species that had existed in isolation for millennia had discovered they could accomplish together what none of them could achieve alone. The war against the Devourers lasted 3 years. What began as a desperate last stand became something no one had expected. The greatest period of cooperation and innovation in galactic history. Admiral Elena Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the Unity, a ship that perfectly represented what the galaxy had become. The hull was built using Altarian engineering, powered by Krelak energy systems, armed with Zorvan weapons and protected by Vorthak shield technology. The crew included members of 47 different species, all working together as if they had been designed for this purpose. Admiral, reported Commander Zeshtal, a Korthax engineer who had become one of Rodriguez's most trusted officers. Our scouts have located the Devourer command cluster. It's larger than anything we've encountered before. Rodriguez studied the tactical display. The Devourer fleet was massive. Millions of organic ships surrounding what appeared to be a central structure the size of a small moon. This was clearly the heart of their invasion force. Any sign of defensive patterns? She asked. That's the strange part, replied Lieutenant Sarah Kim, the human tactical officer whose mother had once delivered whiskey to Zorvan warriors. They're not defending it. It's almost like they want us to approach. Admiral Teclon of the Zorvan Empire, now serving as Rodriguez's military advisor, frowned at the display. In all our battles, the Devourers have never shown tactical weakness. This feels like a trap. Or an invitation, suggested Dr. Kexathera, the Vorthak scientist who had become the fleet's chief researcher. Our analysis indicates the central structure is not a ship or weapon. It's some kind of communication array. Rodriguez made a decision that would have shocked military commanders throughout the galaxy. Instead of planning an attack, she ordered a single ship to approach the Devourer cluster under a flag of truce. Admiral Teclon protested, you cannot seriously consider attempting communication with a hive mind dedicated to consumption. Why not? Rodriguez replied. We've never actually tried talking to them. We've been so busy fighting that no one thought to ask why they're doing this. The ship that approached the Devourer cluster was small and unarmed. Its crew included specialists in mathematics, music, linguistics, and xenobiology from a dozen different species. Their mission was simple: find a way to communicate with beings that no one believed could be reasoned with. What they discovered changed everything. The Devourers were not evil. They were not mindless. They were refugees. Dr. Tam Chen, a human xenobiologist, was the first to recognize the pattern in the Devourer communications. Working with Krelak harmonic specialists and Vorthak pattern analysts, he decoded a message that had been repeating for millions of years. "Help us," the message said. "We are dying. We are fleeing. We consume because we must survive. Help us find another way." The communication team spent weeks learning to talk to the Devourer collective consciousness. What they learned was both tragic and terrifying. The Devourers had once been a peaceful species in a galaxy far from theirs. They had lived in harmony with their environment for millions of years. But something had come to their galaxy, something worse than the Devourers themselves. Something that consumed not just matter and energy but the very fabric of space-time itself. The Voidwalkers, the Devourer collective explained through mathematical concepts and emotional harmonics. They eat reality. They leave nothing. Not darkness, not emptiness, nothing. Faced with complete annihilation, the Devourers had made a desperate choice. They had converted their entire species into a mobile survival form, capable of consuming and converting matter to fuel their flight across the emptiness between galaxies. They had been running for millions of years, staying just ahead of the pursuing Voidwalkers. "We do not wish to consume," the collective continued. "We wish to live. We wish to stop running, but we cannot survive without conversion. We cannot stop without dying." Dr. Chen brought this information back to Admiral Rodriguez and the Allied command staff. The revelation stunned everyone. The greatest threat the galaxy had ever faced was actually a species of refugees, fleeing from something even worse. "So what do we do?" asked Elder Zanril of the Krelak, participating in the meeting through quantum communication. "We cannot simply allow them to continue consuming worlds. And we cannot fight the Voidwalkers," added Admiral Corthex of the Galactic Defense Force. "If they can drive the Devourers to flee across multiple galaxies, they are beyond anything we can handle." Rodriguez looked around the command room at the representatives of species that had learned to work together over the past 3 years. Zorvan warriors sat beside Altarian engineers. Krelak artists worked with Vorthak scientists. Humans served as coordinators and translators, helping everyone understand each other. "What if we don't have to fight them?" she asked quietly. The room fell silent. "Explain," requested Dr. Kexathera. "The Devourers are running because they can't survive without consuming," Rodriguez said. "But what if we could help them find another way to live? What if we could give them what they need without them having to take it?" What followed was the most ambitious project in galactic history. Instead of fighting the Devourers, the allied species began working with them. Altarian engineers, working with Devourer biotechnicians, developed new methods for energy conversion that didn't require consuming living worlds. Krelak energy specialists taught the Devourers how to extract power directly from stellar radiation. Vorthak scientists shared techniques for efficient resource utilization that could sustain large populations with minimal environmental impact. Most importantly, human social coordinators helped both sides learn to work together despite their completely different ways of thinking and living. The project took 2 years. At the end of it, the Devourer fleet had been transformed from a consuming swarm into a mobile civilization capable of sustainable existence. They became the galaxy's guardians, using their massive fleets and biotechnology to patrol the empty spaces between galaxies, watching for signs of the Voidwalkers. The war ended not with victory or defeat, but with integration. The Devourers became the newest members of galactic civilization, bringing their own unique capabilities and perspectives to the growing alliance of species. On the day the final peace accords were signed, Elder Zixthala requested one last meeting with the Galactic Council. The ancient Vorthak appeared before the assembly as he had 75 years earlier. But this time he was not bringing a warning. "Fellow beings," he began, "I stand before you today to admit that I was both right and wrong about the humans." The chamber was quiet as he continued. "I warned you that humans would reshape everything they touched. I told you they would not follow the rules that govern all other species. I said they would bring chaos to our ordered galaxy." The elder paused, looking around at the diverse gathering. The chamber now included representatives from species that had never spoken to each other before the human arrival. Former enemies sat side by side. Ancient isolationists participated in galactic affairs. Even the Devourers had a representative, a bioconstruct that pulsed gently with harmonic frequencies. "I was right about all of that," the elder admitted. "The humans have reshaped everything they touched. They have broken every rule we thought was unbreakable. They have brought chaos to our ordered galaxy. But I was wrong about what that would mean. I thought chaos was dangerous. I thought change was threatening. I thought the old ways were better simply because they were old. The Elder's image shifted to show recordings from the past 3 years, species working together in ways that had never been possible before, technologies advancing at unprecedented rates, problems being solved through cooperation instead of competition. A galaxy that was more prosperous, more innovative, and more peaceful than it had ever been. The humans did not conquer us, he said. They did not replace us. They helped us become better than we were. They showed us that the greatest strength is not the ability to destroy your enemies, but the ability to turn your enemies into friends. The galaxy we have today would have been impossible without human chaos. The cooperation we now take for granted would never have happened without human stubbornness. The peace we enjoy would not exist without human refusal to accept that problems cannot be solved. The Elder's voice grew stronger as he reached his conclusion. I warned you about humans because I feared change. But change, I have learned, is not something to be feared. It is something to be embraced. The humans taught us that the future does not have to be the same as the past. They taught us that working together is better than standing alone. They taught us that hope is stronger than fear. The galaxy was warned about humans. No one listened. And that fellow beings was the best thing that ever happened to us. The session ended with something that had never occurred in the millions of years of Galactic Council history. Every representative, from every species, including the former enemies and the ancient isolationists, stood and applauded. Later that day, Admiral Rodriguez sat in her private office aboard the Unity, reading reports from across the galaxy. Human children were playing with young aliens of dozens of species in schools throughout the Outer Rim. Former enemies were working together on joint research projects.